Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Okay, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, people of all races, colors, and creeds, welcome back to the greatest show on earth. Greg Anthony here, the investigative journal on FirstAmendmentRadio.com on this Friday. Don't go anywhere. Did you hear that Trump rally yesterday? 58,000 people in Texas. You know something? America's great again, right? Well, anyway, what a show. It just showed me how American politics is nothing more than theater, and we are just extras in this big, huge show they're putting on. I wish it was real, but you know what? Behind the scenes, there's a cynical, diabolical thing going on that we try to get to in this show, and that's why we call it the show that fights against the Vatican-led Jesuit, let's add the Franciscans, New World Order. And today I want to discuss two things. One, why the CIA needs Vatican intelligence, and two, the Rwandan Genocide. I love talking about genocides, not from the fact that millions of people get killed, but to prove a point that how come the Vatican's involved in all of these? And I've talked about the Rwandan Genocide in the past. Today I want to do a little bit more of a historical look at it, but also you have to remember, if you go and Google it, you'll find that the Pope has already apologized, but it was a hollow apology nonetheless. But anyway, they do admit to it. But what is this, how does Rwanda have to do with why the CIA needs Vatican intelligence? Some people call it Catholic Intelligence Agency. But anyway, from an article I picked up, it said this: Salt Lake City, Utah. The significance of a global network of priests sank in for Thomas Rees on the day the president of Rwanda's plane was shot down. The Catholic analyst and author had been interviewing a church leader at the Vatican when his source's phone rang. The call about the plane crash had been made to notify the headquarters of the Catholic Church that trouble was brewing. That was the beginning of an absolute disaster, Rees said, referring to the 1994 Rwandan genocide that led to approximately 800,000 deaths, and I think there's probably more. By sitting in a Vatican office building, Rees learned of the assassination before millions of others. The call helped him understand why the Vatican is widely regarded as one of the best listening posts in the world. The Vatican has sources of information that the CIA would kill to get, said a Jesuit priest who is also chairman of the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom. For that reason and others, the United States has sent an ambassador to the Holy See, a term that refers to the sovereign government of the headquarters of the Catholic Church. And this has been going on since 1984. American diplomats throughout the world benefit from the eyes and ears of the world's largest faith, while the Vatican relies on U.S. military and economic might to aid in humanitarian crises. Well, that's a good one. But we clearly are a superpower. But they are a superpower of soft power, said Miguel Diaz, who served as U.S. ambassador to the Holy See from 2009 to 2012. So he's saying that the Vatican is a superpower of soft power. Okay. America and the Holy See continue to need one another to find solutions to refugee crises in Europe. How come they get worse? They've never solved these things. Ongoing armed conflict in the Middle East and the pending turmoil elsewhere in the world. However, relations have been tense since the election of Trump, whose America First thinking contradicts with Pope Francis's appeal for all countries to do more to help marginalized people around the globe, Diaz and others noted. Now here's a perfect example of the Hegelian dialectic. They say for consumption here, that Trump and Francis are diametrically opposed. That's true. But because they need to have an enemy, for example, Trump needs the Pope as the enemy, Pope is globalist, Trump is nationalist. They fight together, and in the end they'll get a synthesis they both want. So they both work together. That's why, behind the scenes, they sit down between Georgetown University and the White House, and they have coffee and tea and beer and everything, and laugh about this so-called chaos they're creating. Now this month, and this was whenever this article was, the Trump administration took early steps towards soothing early tensions. Okay, so they're talking here between about a lot of different military powers, the Vatican and the U.S. getting together. Now, you know what Vatican City's all about, but if you don't, Vatican City consists of a little more than 100 acres. You know something? My dad's farm, we had 250 acres. I didn't realize that we had a dairy farm in Burlington, Wisconsin, and I guess we could have started our own country, and it would have been twice the size of the Vatican. You can do that. If they can do it, why can't we? Well, because they deal with people like Mussolini. Okay, that's how they got it. But anyway, it's completely surrounded by Rome. I know that. I used to be there and walk around it. And it's home to a religion and an independent nation state. Members of its diplomatic corps embody the dual entity. Vatican diplomats train as priests, but act as spies. I added that. Before attending the Pontifical Ecclesiastical Academy, the oldest school for diplomacy in the world. That's interesting. No wonder our politicians want to get close to them, right? Once enrolled, they learn international law, how to write reports, how to do work in different languages, the history of the Vatican's diplomatic relations, and other diplomacy policy skills. How do they have time to practice their faith? I don't think they do. Some graduates are sent to other countries as papal nuncios or diplomatic representatives from the Holy See. Other staff, the Vatican's Secretariat of State, the equivalent of the U.S. State Department. So they got a State Department. Isn't this crazy? In addition to the official diplomatic work of papal nuncios, the Secretariat of State, now that was a horse. Now, Secretariat had no business in the Vatican, and I wish they wouldn't use his name, because I really loved Secretariat. And if you've listened to my stories, I knew the original jockey of Secretariat who got thrown off Secretariat after training him. And if you want me to go into that story, I will, because it's much more interesting than this garbage. But I tell you, that's a great story. How I met Ronnie Rowland and the original jockey of Secretariat. How we ended up going together, because Ronnie was dying, and he asked me if he'd take him back to South Carolina, where he sat on Secretariat as a young horse being trained before his 2-year-old racing season. And so I took Ronnie back to South Carolina, and we actually rode some horses there. One of my little-known skills. I used to ride and exercise horses. I trained some race horses. It's one of my great loves. I should be doing that now instead of bumping my gums here. But anyway, I get carried away. I'd really rather talk about that, but I promised you I would talk about why the CIA needs Vatican intelligence, and then why the Vatican, a historical look at the Rwandan Genocide that they were involved in, and actually priests killing other people. Crazy. In addition to the official diplomatic work of these nuncios. Okay, we got into that. Now imagine this, he said. Imagine a riot between Muslims and Christians in some village in Africa. If the U.S. wants to know what's going on, it could send a satellite overhead and tap everyone's phones. But Americans probably couldn't leave their embassy without a 4-car caravan with armed guards. The Vatican could call the bishop, and the bishop could call a pastor in the village and see what's going on. See? What did I tell you? There are spies. The Vatican and And they use them as intelligence agencies. I've talked about so many of these Jesuits who are hired by the U.S. government, and they go over there for some kind of humanitarian relief fund when actually they're spies. Now, as ordained priests, Vatican diplomats are fulfilling a religious mission, although whether they're doing so directly or indirectly depends on the day. Rees said, the Holy See wants to keep the lines of communication open with all countries, but it also hopes to use its connections to further the societal interests, such as caring for the poor. I got a fly here today. He wanted to listen to the show, driving me absolutely crazy. Such as caring for the poor and working for peace. In the worst moments of world history, like in World War II and this so-called Cold War, the Vatican was always willing to talk to anybody and everybody. When there's a serious crisis, you may have to talk with the devil himself, said one Jesuit priest. Boy, I'll tell you, I don't doubt they talked to the devil himself. That appeared to be the case when the Holy See maintained diplomatic relations with Cuba after the rise of Fidel Castro, who oppressed the Catholic community. More recently, Pope Francis offered blessings for the Philippines and President Rodrigo Duterte in January, although the controversial leader has been an outspoken critic of Catholic priests and the Pope himself. History will always question the Holy See's wisdom. However, in signing a concordat with the Nazis officials in 1933, the agreement allowed the Catholic Church to continue freely operating in Germany, but it also required bishops to swear loyalty to the Reich. In the past, American officials have, what have they done? Turned to Catholic leaders for help defeating communism in Poland and for information about riots in Haiti. I told you these guys are everywhere. It wasn't safe for Americans to leave the embassy. The church is in every corner of the world, Diaz said. The Holy See, on the other hand, benefits from American economics and military resources. Of course they do, Fagioli said, noting that it looks to the U.S. for help during wars and humanitarian emergencies. The Vatican knows it must have a channel of communication open with Washington. I tell you, there's that tunnel between Georgetown and the White House, which is really where they talk about all this stuff that we never hear about. Soon, they always have to have this mutual relationship. Soon after the United States was founded, American leaders sent a representative to the Vatican. I told you, see what I mean? When I made the statement that the Vatican created America and that some of our founding fathers are actually Jesuit priests, people don't think I'm so crazy now. At the time, the Catholic Church controlled around 1/3 of what is now Italy. We had representatives there because of commercial interests, Rees said. Our boats wanted to go into the harbor. However, that position became unnecessary after the Vatican shrunk to its current size. In general, support for a diplomatic relation with the Holy See was low around the turn of the century, in the 20th century, because of rising anti-Catholic sentiment. Oh, I wish it would have stayed that way. You know something? These guys are amazing. And for a long time, there were tensions between the papacy and the United States because the U.S. was afraid of faithful Catholics in their own country. Yes, we know about that. And, did you realize that after the Vatican was, and some of the Jesuits were pinned for the murder of Abraham Lincoln, nobody ever talks about this anymore, and I better whisper it, because if I talk too loud, they may arrest me. Yes, but anyway, after the Vatican was involved in the killing of Lincoln, and it was proven almost, and they actually hid out one of the co-conspirators in the Vatican, our smart representatives in Congress decided to cut off all diplomatic relationships with that organization, knowing it is evil. But, as time went on, people forget. And when Ronald Reagan came in, and there's a new statue of Reagan and Pope John Paul II, he ushered in Vatican diplomacy again and again officially recognized the Holy See and the Vatican as a city-state, or whatever they call them. So official diplomatic relations were restored, and boy, I'll tell you what, that's why I once said Reagan was a real traitor, but everybody loves Ronnie, don't they? Oh, they just love Ronald Reagan. I went to his library over in Simi Valley, and I had a good time with it, really. I remember they give you a little podium there, and you can stand up and take a picture like you're a president. And you got, just like you're giving a rally like Trump did yesterday in Dallas before 58,000 people. But anyway, getting back to the more important things in life. What did Roosevelt do? Sent a non-salaried personnel representative to the Vatican. They were doing it under the table with him during World War II because he knew it would provide ample opportunities to spy on the Nazis. Because the next several administrations continued this trend in spite of resistance from Congress and the public. And by 1984, like I mentioned, Americans were more accepting of the Vatican's role in global affairs, and President Ronald Reagan restored full diplomatic relations, yes he did, with the Holy See. And it's only fitting for these two great empires to work closely together. You see, you guys, I'm on your side. It's only fitting you guys work together. You both deserve each other. Now, President Reagan smiles at the crowd in this picture I'm looking at as he stands with John Paul II. And it was during a Fairbanks, Alaska, May 2nd, 1984, speech they both gave. And the two world leaders worked together throughout the 80s to topple communism in Poland. Oh, what a crock that is. Did you realize they created communism? Yep. Just like the Jesuits created socialism in the Paraguay experiments in the 1600s, but they don't get any credit for it. I try to give them credit for it, because they deserve it, don't they? Now, this is an interesting paragraph. And this may be my segue, or I might wait to the second half hour, because I want to give you some real historical stuff about Rwanda. Because I've done shows talking about the direct involvement of the priests in the killing. But we have to look at this a little bit differently, I think, and get a better understanding of these genocides, as we always do when we talk about them. We give you the blood and guts, but then go back and show you how this really operates, and how then the cover-up is even better than how it operated even before the genocide. And they all are similar. The genocide of all the Native Americans, the Native Canadians, that's one. And we've talked about many others, the Croatian genocide. Well, we can't leave out the Nazi genocide, the genocide of the Jews and many, many Orthodox Christians in Russia and all over the place. And don't forget Vietnam and the Buddhists. But they all have similarities. And so let's today, when I start on Rwanda, look a little bit back a little bit farther. Not just talk about the blood and guts. But anyway, formal and informal relations between these two powers have led to a variety of interesting and even, they say, life-saving developments. Are they really... Does this guy really realize that they've killed more people in the name of God than anybody? I don't think so. But one of the most famous examples was the Cuban Missile Crisis. Oh, God. And here we got John the 23rd involved in this. And it's crazy when you start reading. I mean, they're involved, and I say this, in every darn thing. Listen to this. I got to read this. This is funny. Pope John the 23rd, I got a picture of him here, sitting at a temporary altar in the Benediction Hall at his summer residence in Castel Gandolfo. I know where that's at. I've driven by there. This was in 1961. He reads a message in which he appealed to the world leaders to turn to negotiations to avoid a third world war. The pontiff mentioned no leader specifically, but his appeal came and pressure from non-aligned nations to bring Kennedy and Khrushchev together face to face. Wow. President Kennedy, whose Catholic faith was viewed as a liability as a candidate, contacted the Pope about the Soviet Union's troubled presence on Cuba as he weighed military intervention. So anybody that says the Vatican is not involved in political affairs is really crazy. Look at this. Kennedy calls the Pope. They ended up killing Kennedy. But anyway, Nikita Khrushchev then, the leader of the Soviet Union, swore that any interference would be met with force. But the U.S. and Soviet governments were on the brink of nuclear war. Those are the days when we had to sit under our desks. We'd have those bomb scares, nuclear war scares. Get under your desk, kids. I'll tell you, when I didn't get out of there. When they said, get up and do your homework, I just stayed under there. I said, no. I am frightened to death. I'm staying here. There could be a nuclear attack this afternoon. So I'm staying here till lunchtime. That didn't go over too good. I remember one time, I was kind of a mischievous young kid, but I was in 3rd grade one time, and Sister Mary Angelica decided to hang me from the coat locker. It was a cold day, and that was because I put ants down the back of Rita Scarbon's neck. Me and Rita were always fighting each other. Oh, I'd get arrested for that today. Can you imagine if that happened today? That'd be on national news. White boy puts ants down the back of and they'd make up if it was some kind of minority, and pretty soon I'd be on the news and arrested for battery. I guess you could get arrested for battery. And I could explain legally why. But anyway, it was a kid's prank. I put some ants down. You should have saw what she did to me, though. She stabbed me once with a pencil. And all these things were okay back then. Kids will be kids, right? Today it'd be a national affair. It'd be on the news. But anyway, Sister had to do something, so she first tried one of her methods that she used on me, which was to put a penny on the blackboard and put my nose there and say, stay there until the bell rings. That is tough. Let me tell you something. I asked her halfway through, I had like 20 minutes to go, could you put $1 there? A quarter? A silver dollar? Because this penny is really small and I got a big nose. And I figured after that I could get the money anyway, But anyway, that didn't work. So then one day we had these coat rooms in our room, and they had, it was a big long place where everybody hung their coats because it was winter in Chicago. And then one day when I did that, she said, put your coat on. I said, oh, good, thank God I'm leaving. And then she hung me from the coat rack. It didn't really hurt because I had a big, huge coat on. And only left me there a couple minutes because she probably thought I would die. But anyway, that was really fun. And it goes to show you, though, that back then, if she did that today, oh my God, she'd be in jail for 20 years. But anyway, those were the days, the Wild West, when anything went. But anyway, it was a little better back then, even though this stuff went on. I mean, it kind of reminds you that people will be people. Nowadays, you can't do a damn thing. And you know what happens? Passive aggressiveness. People get passively aggressive. They hold all these little things in, then they explode and they become a Unabomber or something like that. Or a serial killer. So basically, maybe it's good sometimes to put the ants down the back of Rita Scarbon. And, boy, that was a long time ago in my days of Catholic education. But anyway, we're going to get back to talking about the Rwandan Genocide. I think we covered pretty well why the CIA needs the Vatican intelligence organization. And probably better than the CIA. Back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the Third Temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn, the Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the Third Temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the Scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This ain't happening.
Okay, we're back right at it on the Investigative Journal. Glad you came back. Why am I glad you came back? Personally, I really don't care if you came back, but I guess I could say I'm glad. You know, we as people say a lot of things we don't mean just because it sounds good. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. But anyway, before I get back to the Rwandan Genocide, just one little thought. The baseball season's coming to an end. You know, I'm an avid baseball fan. And the Cubs are, of course, out of it this year, didn't make the playoffs. And we're seeing the Yankees on the brink of disaster. They're down 3-1 in games for the American League Conference Championship. And it looks to me like the Astros are going to go on to play the Washington Nationals, who were the old Montreal Expo organization. And this is their first trip to the big dance, the big World Series. So looks like we're going to have the Nationals against the Astros. I just wanted to mention that because I want to keep myself grounded. Baseball is something that I've enjoyed. That's one of the reasons why I personally love America. Without that, I would not be an American. That's for sure. And also Chicago hot dogs. Without those two things, those are my two big reasons for liking America. Anyway, let's get back to the Rwandan Genocide. I promised you I'd do that. And like I said, we've covered this in the past. And it's a very sad story of how the Vatican priests were involved in actually killing people and establishing these camps of destruction. Very sad story. And this is not just theory coming from many Rwandan newspapers and people close to the scene there. And we also have an apology, a very hollow apology, from Pope Francis about their involvement in this. So my point is, it's nothing new. They can apologize all they want, but they constantly have been involved in these genocides throughout their history. And they're going to be involved in them in the future. So it's good to understand that this organization will double talk its way out of anything, just like The American government has done that very well over the years. They both have good propaganda campaigns or advertising and publicity campaigns, which tell you that the Vatican is the best and the most holiest religion in the world, while America will tell you it is the greatest since sliced bread. So they have a lot in common. But looking at this a little bit more seriously in this half hour, I found an article by Ellen Carmody, and she covered this pretty well from a standpoint of historical views on why this occurred, what happened, and can there ever be any kind of reconciliation? Now, I say there never will be reconciliation, but anyway, let's look at what she said. And she starts out by saying that the Roman Catholic tradition is one of reconciliation of the 7 sacraments. Okay, now I'm talking about Catholic beliefs. Now, it is a doorway, they say, to the sacred, where believers ask God for forgiveness and receive the healing grace of Jesus through absolution. Now, forgiveness and love are at the center of this sacrament. That's what Catholics are told, and are at the heart of the Catholic faith. That's what people are told. And this focus on so-called love and forgiveness is what creates a disturbing, very disturbing paradox, as we will analyze today, the Catholic Church's role in the genocide against the Tutsis. And that's not Tootsie Roll Pops, I'm not making light of this, but the Tutsis in Rwanda. The Catholic Church was the only religious institution present for the entire scope of the genocide. Doesn't surprise me. Including developing the early 20th century ideological framework that established this ethnic divide between the Rwandan people. So here we go. What do I tell you about what they do? They divide and they conquer, right? What are they doing today in America? They're taking globalists on one side and nationalists on the other and creating this ideological framework between two competing groups of people. They're doing it here. They did it in Rwanda, and they did it in many other genocides that we talk about. So is America getting set up? Well, of course. Only question is when this will come to fruition and we become a globalist country. Now, Catholic churches were the sites of many of these massacres in Rwanda in the 90s during this genocide. And there are countless stories of church officials who actively participated in the killings. Now, the question she raises is a good one, because how can people of faith, supposed faith, participate in such horrific events? If the sacrament of reconciliation, and we're looking at what they believe, they say, provides an individual path for forgiveness, what is the path for institutional forgiveness? Oh my goodness, is it so easy that they can just go to confession and wipe this away? Or can it be, and I'm saying this, or can Pope Francis just get up an apology and everything's forgiven? But she goes on to say this is a question that people of Rwanda and the Catholic Church have been struggling with over the past 20 years. It's not easily answered, but recent developments have provided, she says, some hope in this process. Okay, so looking at this, what was the role? I asked this question when I was doing this story originally. Where was the Catholic Church before this genocide? What were they doing there? Why were they there? And when we begin to answer the question about institutional forgiveness, we must look at how the Catholic Church participated in developing and cultivating ethnic ideology. So Francis was apologizing, right, and wanting, I guess, forgiveness. But is it merited based on what they've been doing for a long time and based on other things, their MO and other genocides? Now, before the colonial period, 1897, and before Catholic missionaries arrived, The people of Rwanda did not divide themselves along any ethnic lines. In fact, the term Hutu, Tutsi, Twa were social and economic classifications referring to whether a person was a part of a herding, Tutsi, agricultural, Hutu, herding group, they had sheep and things, or agricultural, or Hutu, or hunting community, a Twa. The people of Rwanda spoke the same darn language and organized themselves by clans. As the German colonists and Catholic missionaries arrived, they thought they needed a system that supported their governance and superiority over the Rwandans. So basically, they were trying to control them, right? Instead of leaving them alone, they were trying to control them, feeling superior. Now, my first question is that a Christian attitude? Of course not. But using these existing social groups, the missionaries propagated the idea that each of these groups was ethnically distinct, with the smaller Tutsi group being intellectually and physically superior to the larger Hutu group. So what are they doing here? They're creating a divide. They're creating chaos. They don't need to do that. Why did they do this? Did they have instructions to do this? But they've done this for centuries. What are they doing in America now? They're creating this idea that if you're a nationalist, if you like America, you're a dumb Walmart smelly shopper. And the only people that are intelligent and smart are the globalist elite from California and New York, right? Doing the same damn thing. Creating superiority groups, creating strife between people. Now, they're telling them that the Tutsi group was intellectually and physically superior to the Hutu group. Now, when the Belgian colonists established power after World War I, the Catholic Church aligned itself with the government. This was easier since Belgium was a majority Catholic country and the previous German colonists were Protestant. But in the 1930s, Catholic missionaries used their influence and power to help secure the banishment of the King of Rwanda. Well, now why are they getting involved in this? And his name was Huey Musinga, for the simple reason that he refused to be converted to Christianity. Now, why? Why did he? First of all, they're making a mistake here in this article, because he refused to be converted to Catholicism, which I may add is not Christianity. They have to be separated, the two words, before you really understand this, because Christianity, and many of you Bible believers out there will agree with me, that has nothing to do with Catholicism. So let's remember that. But in 1943, when King Mutara III was baptized, there was a wave of conversions. So they get rid of the king who said, no, I want to keep my traditions. And they put this guy in who was baptized, and all of a sudden everybody's getting converted, right? This was not necessarily because of profound faith experiences of the people, but because of what? The zeal of the missionaries. And I don't know if it was just zeal, but maybe they were forced to do it or else. Now think quantity over quality here. The king's baptism was based on the advice of Bishop Leon Claes, advisor of the Belgian colonial administration, so we got a Catholic involved in this. As a result of these conversions, there were now geographical centers to disseminate, and again she uses Christianity here, it's Catholicism, and a large increase in church personnel. Now in 1946, the king truly enabled these missionaries to reshape Rwandan society to European and Roman Catholic values when he officially consecrated the country of Rwanda to Christ. Now, first of all, you can see what's happening here. First of all, they misrepresent Catholicism as Christianity. And second of all, then they say they're bringing in Roman Catholic values as if those are Christian values, and they're not. Because no one would force somebody to become a follower of Christ in the Christian community, right? But it seems the Vatican has this way of kind of doing that, don't they? With the end of World War II, there was a push to end colonial regimes around the world, and the leaders in the Catholic Church took notice of this and began to align themselves with the Hutu majority instead of the Tutsi minority. Now, the Tutsi minority, weren't they the ones that were supposedly intellectually superior to the Hutu majority? They anticipated a change in leadership and were well established as advisors to the first Hutu leaders when Rwanda gained independence in 1962. But instead of an independence for all people of Rwanda, the government kept the strategy of ethnic division. So that was the Vatican strategy here, the Catholic Church strategy, divide the people, and developed a Hutu ideology that supported Hutu superiority. So now they're turning around, and they're giving the Hutus the superiority. And before, what was it? The Tutsi superiority, right? So why are they doing this? Well, I think what it's going to lead to is more control and a genocide. Now, the Catholic Church was integral in shaping Hutu-centric curriculum in the schools and forming people's beliefs about ethnic identity from the pulpit. Religious language by publishers, not the church, was used to spread hate. The Hutu 10 Commandments are prime examples of anti-Tutsi propaganda. These commandments were published in a Rwandan newspaper in 1990 and outlined Hutu responsibilities for maintaining powers at the expense of the Tutsi minority. 98% of the country identified as Catholic now, yet quotas were put into place in the seminary so that 96 of the men studying to become priests were Hutu. This is especially interesting when pondering the question of why did so many men and women religious, either by commission or omission, participate in the genocide. Now, wait a second. Look what's going on here. I think you can see it. Without their involvement, this would have never happened. The Tutsis or the Hutus would not have killed each other unless they were pushed into it. Kind of reminds me of when you start talking about Vatican involvement in these genocides. They'll say, well, they didn't do it. They were just there helping. And what they do is, just think of this. They begin to push people in a direction. It's kind of like a small snowball at the top of a hill. And it just keeps growing and growing as it moves down and smashes into a rock. And there's your genocide. But a particular influential Catholic leader during the First and Second Republics was Archbishop Perraudin. That's Perraudin. Now, he served as the Archbishop of Kigali and focused on the divide between the Hutsis and Tutsis. Now, here's the Hutus and Tutsis. So here's a guy, he's the Archbishop. He's focusing on division, on chaos. Most publicly and notably in his Lenten letters, which were read in all Catholic churches then. Now, he said this: after the defeat of the counter-revolutionaries, the cockroaches, one would have thought that the reasonable people consecrated to God's service would bow down before the irreversible reality of the victory of the people. Far from it, because they are still nurturing bitter regrets or still hoping for revenge. The Hutu seems to have fallen asleep on the laurels of victory, while the Tutsi is working very hard in order to regain the power of becoming masters. How long can we allow our dear Tutsi brothers to make fools of us and to ignore us and the people from whom we are descended? It's crazy. So they're creating this strife. In Rwanda, the Roman Catholic Church, as an institution, made decisions that codified the Hutu ideology into a belief system with tragic results. Now, there were many voices of dissent here. There were others in Rwanda, not the power base of the Catholic Church and Hutu regime, but priests and bishops who spoke out against these false ideologies and creeds. So here we go. They always play both sides of the fence here. They're always one's on one side of the fence, one's on the other. And it's pretty easy to understand that if you don't have this, you'll never have a conflict, right? They aim to deliver the country from evil that was being created by the propaganda taught in the schools and churches. Bishop Alois, and I can't pronounce his last name, wrote a pastoral letter in 1959 in exasperation after watching the people he served resort to racism and violence. And I'm not going to read the letter, but I'm just going to mention to you that it kind of sounds familiar now. We're seeing this idea that everything you do in America, if you is racist. If you say something, if you have an ideological difference between somebody that might be of a minority and you're different, you have a difference of opinion, you're not allowed to criticize because it's considered racist. And so this priest talked against that, right? Against his other priests who were actually participating in creating this kind of division between the Hutus and the Tutsis. So, in 60, he was even more focused on this direct message to church leaders, okay? But in 1990, 5 priests from the Nyanda diocese wrote a letter to their bishop denouncing the racist quota policy, saying it was high time the Church of Jesus Christ, established in Rwanda, proclaimed aloud and tirelessly to denounce it, since it constituted an aberration in the church. 3 of the 5 were murdered with their congregations during the genocide. Okay, despite the church's role in professing the Hutu ideology, the people in Rwanda found comfort in their faith. They came to their parishes for worship, celebrations, comfort, community, and safety. The Hutus and the Tutsis sat next to one another in church. So when the local militias began killing Tutsis on April 6, 1994, people naturally sought refuge in the churches. There were many brave priests and nuns who hid people in churches, rectories, and convents. Let's not forget that. Hundreds of religious men and women died with the people they served. A Hutu priest, Father Celestin Hakamanzi, from the St. Paul Pastoral Center, bribed militiamen who tried to break in. He wore his robes to intimidate people. Father Celestin is believed to have saved more than 1,500 lives. In the town of there's another story of a Hutu nun tried to hide dozens of Tutsis at her church. This one sounds it's similar to some of the Nazis. Remember, Schindler's List was a movie that talked about on the periphery of the same thing, where there were Nazi Germans who tried to hide the Jews, but they were basically, if caught, were killed as well. And this nun who did that, she chose to die standing in front of the people she loved, instead of stepping aside to be spared. Now, despite these efforts of these men and women, but you see, you have to understand how this operates. They have to have this kind of good guy, bad guy situation to make it work. It's called the Hegelian dialectic. Now, despite the efforts of these men and women, and perhaps beyond comprehension, there were other members of the Catholic Church, here we go, who participated fully in the genocide. That was Father Serembo, and he ordered bulldozers to push down the walls of his parish, killing the 2,000 people inside. There were the Sisters Gertrude and Maria, who led the Interhamwe to kill women and children hiding in their convent and garage. Eyewitnesses stated that Sister Maria used banana leaves to fan the flames as the garage housing killed 500 people burned to the ground. Although these particular men and women weren't prosecuted, there were many other priests and nuns who fled the country and are still practicing in Italy, France, and Belgium, and who were never, ever held accountable. So the question is, Really, when you think about it. How does the church reconcile this? Can they just make a simple apology like Francis did? How do they do it? Can they ever reconcile it? Well, the problem is they can in the eyes of some people, but if you really look at everything they've done as a whole, all the other genocides they were involved in, and the same kind of control idea when they come into a country, I really don't think the only way that it can be reconciled is if they're held to justice and not allowed to do it again. But because of these simple apologies and this propaganda goes on that it was a few bad apples and this is a great religious organization, unfortunately, history will repeat itself. They're never going to change. Never. This will go on and on and on. And I hope, we're going to come back maybe Monday because I want to go a little bit more in depth in the Rwandan genocide, but you're going to see how the same things that happened in the past are similar to what has happened in other countries that were involved in these genocides as well. And it always seems that the Vatican is right there, right in the middle of it. Well, have a good weekend, and see you Monday on the Investigative Journal.
The book of Revelation says, "The spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ." This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.